Today we want to talk about wireless technology. Now, wireless technology has advanced a lot. I mean, when I grew up, we had a phone on the wall. In fact, we had a phone on the wall that we shared with a neighbor, oddly enough. We had to pick up the phone, make sure the neighbor wasn't using it before we could make a call. And frankly, if we picked up the phone and wanted to listen, we could listen to our neighbor's conversation. Kind of weird. But we went eventually from AT&T trying to charge everybody for every single phone you had in the house, eventually to getting the phones off the wall and on the desk, and even beyond that to starting to get wireless technology. And it's just been such a liberating thing, being able to take your phone with you instead of having to be tied to your house just to get a phone call. So let's take a look at the growth of cell phones. You know, the first generations, we see a picture there of a guy holding what looks like it might be a phone, and it in fact was a phone. It was very much like a brick. It was large, it was heavy, not something that you could actually put in your pocket, something that might go in your briefcase if you were lucky. Didn't hold a charge very long, and frankly, you could only talk on it because it was totally analog. It only carried voice, just like the phones on the wall. So basically all they did was exchange the phone on the wall, the same analog technology, and just broadcast it to a device that carried basic radio waves and couldn't carry much else. The next generation comes along, and this is a phone I actually owned at one point. It's a model that could actually start texting people. And so you see, it only still has numbers. You had to do a specific way of handling the numbers in order to send text. It was cumbersome. It was difficult. And later on, as 2G continued to evolve, we had a little bit better screens on it. Still needed to get a lot better. Well, finally, the next generation came along, and 3G allowed you to actually do more than just text. You could actually connect to the internet. You could actually surf the web from your wireless devices that were smart devices, a little bit more like a computer than just a phone. The term phablet became popular for these new mini tablets that were phones as well. That term kind of died away pretty quickly, but it kind of gives you the idea of what people felt about these new smartphones that could connect you to the internet as well as talk to your friends. Third generation, though, really couldn't do a whole lot. You could surf the web, but you couldn't really broadcast or view movies or videos. You know, YouTube was still difficult because it couldn't stream it fast enough to be a good device for watching a movie or a video on. So we go from third generation to fourth generation, which has been around for quite some time. It allowed 10 times faster video than 3G. It at least advertised that. A short movie could be downloaded in about an hour, but users, you know, even though it was advertised that top speed would be 300 megabits per second, which is pretty good for most networks, you really only got that level of service if you were right under the tower and you were the only one using that whole tower. So the challenge here is, how do we get to the point where we're actually getting good enough speed with our phones to be able to do things that are really meaningful, that are time sensitive? So the fifth generation network is seeking to crack that. It's going to be having micro and macro cells. In other words, the cells are going to be quite a bit closer. And the reason why they have to be closer is because the bandwidth they're using is a lot higher as well. So instead of lower bandwidths that are getting crowded by a lot of other devices as well, they're going to up 5G into a higher bandwidth, which means you have to have smaller towers or smaller cell devices more frequently within the telephone's range. They're advertising that it'll be 10 times faster than our current 4G networks. An HD movie would download in 4 seconds instead of an hour. it would stream live 4K TV or a virtual reality app on our mobile device without any difficulty. So with these quicker times, what we want to do is reduce latency and the amount of time it takes to transfer data from device to device. For example, if you got a connected car, the connected car needs to know, with all of its safety sensors and everything, needs to know when there's traffic problems or when there's other challenges that the driver could expect. The car would then be able to take care of that. Another device that they want is they want to be able to broadcast from 2 different locations back and forth for surgeries to happen in robotics, internal robotics, where these robotic services need very, very quick connections. So these are the kind of things they're looking at 5G being able to do. Well, the challenge with that is that we got to get it implemented. So if you look around, the technology requires a lot of these small cell towers. There's really unique manner in which they implement 5G in order to get that kind of speed, but because it requires a lot of these smaller boxes, of course, there's going to be a lot of new implementations. You can't just install 5G on all the existing towers and expect 5G to work, because it has to be much more compact. You're not going to find 5G when you're driving down the freeway between towns. You're going to find 5G where there's a lot of places to put these new repeaters that are needed to support 5G. So you're going to find it in cities and in towns, but you're not going to find it in small towns or small cities, at least not in the near term. So the challenges that come is that it's costly to do that. You've got to erect all of these towers and all of these places for these, small box size repeaters. And frankly, there's a lack of a clear business case as to why Verizon or AT&T or T-Mobile would really want to do that, except in places where they have a large concentration of people who buy the cell phone coverage. People aren't going to be willing to pay more for the greater bandwidth. Why implement it when 4G is good enough? The challenge is going to be that people are going to have to demand it in order for it to really propagate, and the cost of the implementation is going to just need to be driven down. So if we look at a Verizon map here, the Verizon map shows those circled dots where the 5G ultra-wideband exists. The 5G nationwide is the dark red on the map. And then you see the rest of the nation with basically 4G, or the white spaces actually have nothing. So you see that the penetration for 5G really isn't all that widespread quite yet for Verizon. If we look at T-Mobile, we see T-Mobile has the light pink there where they have 5G. They seem to be a little bit more broadly spread, but frankly, they still are not, widely covering the entire nation. In fact, a lot of places on the East Coast, like you look here, this big concentration in Virginia, you don't see a whole lot of the light pink. You see North Carolina covered fairly well. You see Minnesota covered fairly well, but you don't see the penetration like you do with 4G that covers almost all of Nebraska, for example. If you look at AT&T, they have the same challenge. The light blue is the current 5G coverage of AT&T. So you see a lot of places that are white where they have no coverage at all. Most of Alaska has no coverage, so don't get AT&T in Alaska. So you see that the 4G and LTE and other coverages exist in a lot of places, but AT&T is penetrating some places, like here's along the I-70 corridor in Missouri, for example. AT&T covers that fairly well, but it's spotty in a lot of other places. So currently, without a strong business case, fifth generation is going to take its time in getting to you. It might not live up to the promises. We don't know. We haven't seen it we haven't seen it implemented a lot. Higher frequency means that it's frequently blocked by buildings. The higher frequencies can't penetrate the buildings like 4G can. So you might find that you have 5G out on the street and 4G when you walk inside the building. It's this type of challenge that 5G is going to have until 5G has the kind of penetration and coverage that it needs to have in order to make it consistent through every place that you walk into or around. They figure by 2025 that half of everybody in the US will have 5G coverage. So you have to have a 5G phone. And by then, of course, we're seeing 5G phones all over the place now. We talk about first mover bonus. There's really no first mover bonus with any of the big carriers, you know, Verizon or AT&T or T-Mobile. Neither one is going to have an advantage by implementing it first. So we'll see. We'll see as it progresses how well it is doing. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Get a kind of a high overview of what wireless technology is doing. And if you like this video, please hit the like button and please subscribe to the channel so we can continue to grow. We'll talk to you later. Thanks.